marking measurements. Do you realize you've got pretty well a large yardstick with you? You go from one place to another. Say, I'd like to know, let me see now, how about 18 inches? It was based on the human body. Here's the middle finger of my hand, finger's breadth. That is 13 sixteenths of an inch. I believe that's it. 13 sixteenths of an inch. Then here's the hand breadth, about 3 1/4 inches from here to here. Here's the span, 9 1/2 inches. And then here's the cubit. It's the length of the forearm from the elbow to the tip end of the middle finger. Now you can measure your own sometime with a yardstick and find. I'm so glad to announce that I'm normal in this one respect, because I'm 18 inches from here to here. And these others I measure out pretty well too. This is the span, my hand stretched like this, 9 1/2 inches. And so the cubit was at least that. Now, people talk often about the cubit of the sanctuary, the cubit of the temple or the tabernacle, which was probably more, 22 inches. And when you come to the tabernacle in the book of Exodus, you'll say so many cubits and all. Probably the cubit there is 22 inches, cubit of the sanctuary. But suffice it to say that the cubit is at least 1.5 feet. So the waters went at least 22.5 feet above the top of the highest mountain. Then the third verse is chapter 7, verse 24. 7:24 says that the waters prevailed upon the earth for 150 days. 150 days is 5 months. Now I know what is meant by that. Chapter 7, verse 24, the waters prevailed upon the earth. It means they were at their maximum height before they began to recede. And for 5 months after the flood started, they were still at their maximum height. My, what a mighty judgment of God it was. I believe the Bible teaches in the book of Revelation, especially, that in the end time, in the future, there's going to be judgments even greater than the judgments of the flood. Just how all that works out, you don't know, and I'm careful how I interpret some of those passages in Revelation. But we're going to have great judgments in the future. And I don't know if our own land continues in sin as it is in sin, how close we are to God's judgments. You know, everybody feels sorry for those who were visited by Hugo. I do too, but there's the other side to that, and that is Hugo's the judgment of God. There's no doubt about that. Judgment of God. That doesn't necessarily mean that those in Charleston were worse than anybody else. And when those in the path of Hugo are worse than anybody else. But Hugo was the judgment of God. And you know how many of those things we've had recently. And you know, they're predicting now that in the next few years that we're going to have more earthquakes here in the east. Most of them have been out west. In 1886, there was a great earthquake down in Charleston. Boy, it was destructive down there in Charleston, 1886. We haven't had many earthquakes in the east lately, but weather forecasters say we're going to have some more earthquakes in the east. You say, do you dread it? Oh, if that's God's judgment, I'll trust my life to Him, be willing to go in terms of His will. But it takes God's judgment to turn men back to the Lord. Then the fourth indication of the greatness of the flood was, how long were they in the ark? You know? How long were Noah and his family in the ark? A little more than a year. And you find that when you compare chapter 7:11, remembering that they went into the ark 7 days before the flood began. 7:11 with chapter 8, verse 14. 7:11, chapter 8, verse 14 shows that they were in the ark for a year and 17 days. That is just a little bit more than a year. What a mighty judgment of God came through the flood. Let's take the sixth question and we'll pick up the fifth one next time. Noah as a mighty man of God, by checking carefully chapter 6 to 8, along with Hebrews 11:7 what indications of Noah's great faith do you find? Let me mention 4 characteristics of Noah's great faith. The first, he had pioneering faith. Pioneered, I-N-G. He had pioneering faith. That is, he believed that God would do a new thing, such as he'd never done before. Now, one thing that's very clear about this is that they'd never had a flood before, a flood to destroy all mankind. And he believed that God would do a new thing. But many believe, and it seems to me it's pretty clear, that not only had they not had a flood, but it hadn't even rained before. Hadn't even rained before. You see, Pember mentions that in his theory, Earth's Earliest Ages, when he says that there was that canopy over the earth to protect people on the earth from the injurious rays of the sun's heat. And then when the flood came, it destroyed that canopy. Well, he would go along with the idea that it hadn't rained before. Genesis chapter 2, verse 5 says that it hadn't rained, and a mist came up from the earth and watered the ground. In other words, it rained up at that time. I think the whole idea is in connection with the rainbow. How many of you get the idea that there wasn't any rainbow before the flood? Could you see your hands? How many of you get that idea? If that's true, then it hadn't rained. Because you see, the rainbow is a physical phenomenon. The sun shines through the mist, the clouds and the mist. And if it hadn't been a rainbow before, then it hadn't rained. Some take the position that the rainbow had been there, but that now God invested it with a new meaning and made it a sign of his covenant with mankind. Personally, I get the idea from the story that it hadn't rained before. But just think of this. If it hadn't even rained before, then Noah believed that God was not only going to send rain, but he was going to send rain to destroy all mankind from the face of the earth. Here's one great challenge of this. I believe God would give every Christian here something of a pioneering faith, to believe that God would do a new thing such as he's never done before. Have you noticed in reading the prophets, God says in Isaiah, "Behold, I'll do a new thing. I'll do a new thing." And you say, "Nothing like this happened before. I'll do a new thing." And you know, you can't just get a bright idea and think that'd be good for God to do it and then ask him to measure up to it. No, he has to lay it on your heart. But I believe that one characteristic of real faith is that real faith trusts God to do something new he's never done before. Wouldn't it be wonderful if this school year, we've been in existence here in this school now for several years, we could trust God to do something new in this school that he's never done before. Never done before. Well, that's the first way in which Noah's a great example of faith. Pioneering faith. He believed that God would send a worldwide flood even when it hadn't even rained before. The second characteristic of his faith is it was persevering faith. It was faith that just kept persevering right on till the end. Chapter 6, verse 3 is the passage where God says, "Yet shall man's days be 120 years." You see, for 120 years before the flood came, Noah knew it was going to come. But he just kept on. 2 Peter 2:7 in the New Testament says, Noah was a preacher of righteousness. And he just kept on preaching righteousness. 120 years before the flood came. That's characteristic of real faith. I wonder if any of you have people in your families who aren't saved. Your grandmothers, your grandfathers, other friends in your families who aren't saved. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't stop praying the Lord is nigh. Don't stop praying he'll hear your cry. Let's have our prayer. Someone who was in the class up in Virginia told me that he'd gotten a great blessing recently through the prayer we talked about, Psalm 51:10, "Create out of nothing in me a clean heart, O God." He said, I just love that. I've been praying that over and over. Create out of nothing in me a clean heart, O God. Will you just pray that now in your own heart to the Lord? Create out of nothing in me a clean heart, O God. And thank Him that He does it. Let me say it once more and ask you to pray it aloud with me. Create out of nothing in me a clean heart, O God. Pray it out loud with me, everybody. Create out of nothing in me a clean heart, O God. And we thank Thee, Lord, in Jesus' name.